In July of 1919, in Chicago, there were 7 days of rioting, fighting, violence, and killing. This began after Eugene Williams, a young African American man, was stoned to death by whites at the Lake Michigan beach on 29th Street. This triggered racial fights between blacks and whites across certain areas in Chicago for a week. This is known as the 1919 Race Riots and is one of the major incidents in U.S. history. A little while after the Emancipation Proclamation was written, blacks were still kind of hesitant about moving to the North despite all the good things that they've heard about it. The Chicago Defender, a Chicago newspaper that talked about blacks, had a big part in changing the minds of African Americans and telling them to go to the North instead of staying in the South. The Chicago Defender wrote stuff about how bad things were happening to blacks in the South, including lynchings, racial discrimination, and other bad things. Blacks wanted a better life, so as a part of the Great Migration, blacks moved to cities such as New York, Washington, D.C., Detroit, Milwaukee, and Chicago. In 1915, the first wave of blacks moved into Chicago. This was around when World War I was started. The Red Summer is known as a bunch of racial violence events in different parts of the U.S. in 1919. The Red Summer started with a race riot in South Carolina where 3 blacks were killed. Jackie Robinson was born in 1919. During the Great Migration, thousands of African Americans from the South had settled next to neighborhoods of European immigrants on Chicago's South Side, near jobs in stockyards and meatpacking plants. Because of African Americans moving to these neighborhoods with other races that were already there, racial tensions started rising between whites and blacks. The race riot started on a normal day on July 27, 1919, when an African American on a raft on Lake Michigan got stoned to death by whites. And on top of that, instead of arresting whites who stoned Eugene Williams, the police arrested blacks who were at the scene. This outraged blacks. For the next week, fights between blacks and whites were happening. White mobs would catch blacks going home on the train and beat them up as soon as they would get off. Blacks stopped whites driving home and beat them up. Over the course of the 1919 race riots in Chicago, 23 blacks died and 15 whites died. 38 people in total died. The violence got so bad, the mayor of Chicago had to send police to protect all the blacks living in the black belt. There's no Gardensville. After all the police got deployed, the whites stopped attacking the blacks. This incident was known as one of the worst racial conflicts in U.S. history, the 1919 race riots.